Welcome back to the Pearlescent Doll Custom channel. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a single upload. Did you miss me? Thanks everyone for being so patient with me since my last video. A lot has happened since the last upload that I'll update you on later, but for now I'd like to take you on the journey of my latest addition to the Cheetos sister family. Upon popular request, I've decided to do Flaming Hot Cheetos next. I chose dreads to simulate the shape of Cheetos themselves and limited my color palette to really simulate that flame-like look while also having that hot racer baddie vibe. I've kept the ice blue eyes and the freckles to maintain that family resemblance. So let's get moving. For this project I went out and got a Cheer Sunny doll since her skin tone matched the most accurately. So I go ahead and pull out my heat gun and heat up the head so it's malleable enough to pull the head off. Careful not to burn yourself like I did a couple times. It looks so gruesome since her eyes almost pop out of her head when I do it. Speaking of eye popping, her eyes gotta go. So while the vinyl's still hot, I squeeze and pinch until her eyes pop out. We'll be giving her some new eyes out of resin this time. MG was actually courteous enough to give her hair in pigtails already, so I just chop her hair off and cut as close to the scalp as I possibly can. With an X-Acto knife, I remember to cut her head open before the reroot so I can replace her eyes while I'm at it. I also pull the plugs out of her head with some needle nose pliers. Now that she's hairless, I have clear access to her eye pockets, which are also made out of vinyl. I'm going to have to carve those out to make room for the new eyes. I'm pretty skilled with my X-Acto knife, so little by little and heating up the eyes as I go, I whittle away at those eye pockets as close to the face as I can so the eyes can sit flush against her face. Take your time and go slow. I find not plunging the whole blade and only using half of a quarter to the edge is the best. Now that that's out of the way, I can go in with the acetone to remove her factory paint. I then grab some super glue and rejoin the headpieces, careful to align them perfectly. Except this was a grave mistake. I think I went on autopilot here or something, but the whole point of opening her head was to have access to her eye pockets, so sadly I get my X-Acto knife out again and cut another hole in the back of her head again and begin to reroute. But the original glue started to cave with the needle plunging into the head so many times, and the plugs where the bangs were originally so large that they began to rip. So to avoid wasting my time anymore, I threw in the towel and took a trip to Target the next day. Luckily this time around when the winter break line had just been released, and voila, Sunny with no bangs. I couldn't believe my luck. So to avoid rerouting again, I decided to dye her hair instead. I washed the gunk out of her hair with some body wash and then prepare some dye for her hair. I used the Rit General dye since that wouldn't stain the vinyl like the Rit Dye more would. Once I got the color I wanted, I just rinsed it out with cold water and let it dry. I also repeated the whole prep for her face again. I pinned her hair away and prepped her for the face up. I sprayed her with a base coat of Mr. Super Clear and got some respiratory protection while doing so and got to work. I first blushed her face and eyeshadow with Mungyo chalk pastels and did everything else with watercolor pencils. Eyebrows for sure take me the longest to do since I'm really particular about them being super sharp and as clean as possible. So I'm sure at this point you're wondering what happened to me, and I would be more than happy to explain what happened. So basically, right after I uploaded Puffy Cheetos, I basically waited about 2-ish weeks for my next upload because it was around the end of the month already. So my plan was to have an upload every month, or so it was. But by the time that late September, early October rolled around and New York Comic Con was fast approaching, I realized that I wanted to do a whole cosplay to like kind of debut again back into the convention scene, since I was pretty terrified of doing any conventions because of COVID. But once finding out that it was a vaccine mandatory event, I felt a little bit more comfortable going, and I heard the crowds were going to be less packed as usual, so I decided to go. And then on top of that, I had some friends visiting from another country who were really close friends of mine who were also vending at Comic-Con, and they needed my help, and if I couldn't help them, then they wouldn't be able to vend at all, so I wanted to help. And then I started a new job, which was with a mobile game, and I'm still doing it right now. I haven't been able to find steady freelance work since the pandemic happened for obvious reasons. So having this new job, I jumped on the opportunity not knowing how much time it was actually going to take out of my day. And that's about it. I would just do the doll customization in between the little lulls I would have here and there, which were not very many, but which that's basically why I was quiet the whole time. I was just so preoccupied with like doing my illustration work that I mentioned in the last video that I do, that I didn't have time to do my doll customizing stuff because it is a hobby for me. Although I was actually pretty happy to, you know, have that one doll collector contact me. A couple of you actually contacted me because you saw me selling my doll on Mercari, and number one, that was really weird because I didn't think anybody would recognize me on Mercari, so that was really weird having people who've seen my video come up to me in Mercari being like, oh my god, I've seen this doll before, are you so-and-so from YouTube? And I'm like, yeah, that is me. But yeah, that was pretty cool. Yeah, somebody bought this doll that I'm currently working on and the Puffy Cheetos doll, which was pretty cool. I didn't think anybody would ever want to buy my creations, so that's really awesome to, you know, have happen because I am so new to this hobby, and I've been a really big fan of doll creators like Delightful and Hextian and all those people. So not that I'm on that level yet, but I feel like I'm going up there soon. Doll customizing does make me super happy, and it's a hobby that I want to keep up for a while, so it's really validating and really fun. Please ignore any humming you might hear because it's just my PC tower sounding like a complete jet engine. But quickly, I wanted to ask, like, what did you guys dress up for Halloween as? This year I went as Isabelle from Animal Crossing because my boyfriend went as Wilbur from Animal Crossing to Comic-Con, and then I was like, well, I want to match too. Plus we were going to some like steakhouse that was like, yeah, if you come dressed up, we'll give you like a discount and some free like dessert. And I was just like, say less. So I went as Isabelle, and I pulled together like a last minute like costume, which I should have a picture up of. And also too, I think it's only fair to show you the costume that took me away from doll customizing for so long. I went as Mew Ichigo from Tokyo Mew Mew, if anybody recognizes the anime. And it's a dream cosplay of mine. My boyfriend was kind enough to help me finance the costume because it was quite a lot of money to put together, and I will say it was quite the hit. I'm really happy that that was the costume that I came back with after like 2 years of not going to cons, because I don't know if I mentioned this, but aside from freelancing, I do vend at conventions like Comic-Con and sell my artwork, and that was pretty much my career during my college years before the pandemic hit. I'm going for more like a modern Renaissance kind of look. I think 2016 modern Renaissance palette drop where everybody's doing like a warm smoky eye with a nude lip, kind of that vibe. Once satisfied with her face, I prepare her for some lashes. I bought a pair of Wispies from Walgreens, and I just cut them to the size of the eye socket and then applied them with some super glue and some tweezers. I find super glue works best for me because I just don't have the patience or the coordination to use Elmer's glue or any kind of PVC glue. Taking her pins out of her head and removing the fabric covering her hair, I then take a break from the head to do the resin eyes. I mix the UV resin with some white acrylic paint and then pour them into a, I believe, 18mm mold that I got off of Etsy, but I'm not 100% certain. Once I have all the bubbles out of the mold, I then pop them into the UV lamp and then leave them in for about a minute. For the irises, I make some in Clip Studio paint in various different sizes since I really didn't know which one I was going to need, and then print them out. After curing, this is what they look like, and they look pretty cool, and I'm pretty pleased. Onto her hair, which actually stun locked me for about literal week. I put her hair up into braids and set aside the sections I was going to make into locks. I then go over with a fine Q-tip and some acetone to remove her scalp paint carefully. I then paint it red ever so painstakingly. Since I didn't reroot this time, I found that this was the only method to change your scalp color. After trying and failing at many different methods with yarn or string, you name it, I decided to go on Amazon and buy actual Faux Locs people actually use on their head. It definitely came with a lot more than I needed, so I'm definitely putting this aside for future projects. I use this method so I don't actually have to form the locks myself, just install them. It actually came with a crochet needle and some cuffs, which was exactly what I needed. I tried different methods and found that the first one that I used really sucked because I would just pull the strands from the locks themselves and then wrap it around each braid, and it would come out this large bulky mess that just wasn't cutting it for me, and it was way too heavy for her head. And then you have this other method, which I will show you shortly, that looked a lot more better and more fantastic and more appropriate for the size of her head. The process is a bit convoluted, so if you want to do this at home with your own dolls, follow along carefully and I'll try to do the best as I can. So basically I take a braid that I'm going to install the lock on and cut it as close as I can to the scalp, but not too much that I cut too much of the plait or the section that I just separated. Then I grab some got2b glue or got2b hairspray and apply it to the section that we just cut, and then pinch and hold it and mold it while applying heat so it stays in that like pinched position. Once it's in its position, you take the lock that you're going to be applying and grab some got2b hairspray and spray it just to the tip of the end that you will be gluing to the head. I tell you to do this because it's going to be a lot easier to have a hardened surface to be glued to the head than like say like very springy and soft and malleable hair. Apply a liberal amount of super glue to the plait or section of the braid and then press the lock to it and hold it there for 5 to 10 seconds. Once you're sure that the bond has been made, just let it go and it should be holding on just fine, and you won't even see where the braid used to be. And just repeat this process all over the head until you have something that looks like this. It's a really long process, and I'm sure there's a different way to do this, but this is the way that I felt like worked the best for me. And of course trim the hair because it's going to be way too long as it is. Moving on to her hands, with a coat of MSC, I paint on the Cheeto dust onto her fingers like the last doll. I repaint the lock cuffs various fiery colors. Seal these with some varnish too when you're done. She's looking good. Now she just needs a new outfit. Taking the Cheer Sunny's socks, I make some crew socks and rehem them with some tacky glue. I do my best to recycle the clothes from these dolls because I'm no good at sewing. I put the socks on the doll to commence her paint job. With watered down paint, I paint on her flames first to make sure that the socks don't lose their stretch and prevent the design from cracking. I make a gradient from red to yellow like in my concept art. Then with white, I fill in and clean up the flames up top. Moving on to the shoes. To make her bows, I heat up strips of Worbla to create the bow on the sides of her ankle straps. Once applied, I paint the shoe matte black. And of course, we can't forget the red bottoms. I ran to Walmart since I wasn't satisfied with the ribbons up front, so I bought some really thin ones, then made more straps. I commissioned the lovely Hot Dollwear to make the top and bottom and jacket for this custom. They need some alterations and some embellishments since they're pretty basic as they are right now. However, before I do that, I go ahead and add her cheetah spot tattoo. I was inspired by Medusa in the anime Soul Eater for this little detail. If I wasn't such a baby about needles, I'd love to get a similar tattoo. I wanted to incorporate the cheetah spots in a way that wasn't as simple as her clothing. Onto accessories. I nabbed these from a JC doll from the Wild Hearts crew and painted them gold. I also got these sunglasses from a Racer LOL OMG doll. Of course I love the color, but it's going to need a new paint job. I painted green as a base and then blush a gradient of a deeper, cooler green and add some yellow highlights for that graphic effect. So this jacket, I tested paint on the cuffs and it takes acrylic paint super well. I decided to take the plunge and just paint on the yellow trim on the flaps of the motorcycle jacket. This took quite some coats because it's yellow. On the back, I paint on the flaming hot text and the flames. I painted the flames white first to avoid the issue of multiple coats on the front trim I had. You'll see how easy it is to paint it with yellow once the base coat is laid out. I also cleaned up my mistakes and sharpened my shapes with some matte black. So the halter top is definitely too pale. I don't have any time to dye a yellow, so I decided to grab a sponge and dab on some watered down paint till I get the desired color. For the skirt, I used Cheers Sunny's skirt as a pattern and made this half skirt that I hemmed with glue and some cotton fabric. With some thin ribbon, I make the straps for the skirt as well. I left the footage for this part, but I used some simple black paint to paint on the spots. And there you have it. She's by far the prettiest doll I've ever made, and one of the only ones I've ever seen with faux locks. I hope to keep diversifying my looks on my customs since I feel like textured hair types are all too lacking the doll customs here on YouTube. I'll see you all very soon for my Halloween collab upload, and I'm pretty sure you'll all much enjoy it. Until next time, please like and subscribe this video and hit the bell so you never miss a single one of my uploads. See you all soon!